Welcome back. Joining us now is Dwight Mitchell. We've talked to Dwight a couple of times, first about his own personal tragedy, what happened in his family, and he was exonerated, eventually. But the problem is that CPS can take children based on baseless accusations. They can deny you due process. They can take the child and do due process later whenever they get to it. And of course, we're not talking about an inanimate object like a gun or something, right? We're talking about a child who can be severely damaged in that time that they are in the system. And so Dwight has been in the fight to get due process up front for parents, and he's got a national organization to do that, as well as now another organization, Family Preservation Foundation.org. I think that's the one that we're talking about today, isn't it, Dwight? FamilyPreservation.org?
Yes, it is.
Foundation? Yes. And part of this, I mean, they've got some challenges to this massive CPS bureaucracy that is making billions of dollars, destroying families and damaging children. And again, there are circumstances where you have violent parents, but that is the tiny minority of that, a very small minority. But they take that and use that to say we're going to take the kids first, do the due process later, and that is not the typical case. So we're trying to get that reformed. People who have looked at this understand what that is. Dwight has got some videos that are free that will help you to know what your legal rights are. And in most cases, as you pointed out, Dwight, the people are taken advantage of because they're not guilty. And they think, well, I don't have anything to worry about. Let me just explain this to them. I know they'll be fair with me. That's what happened in your case, right?
That's correct. That is what happens in most people's cases, and especially in Minnesota. Minnesota has to take the child first, come back and substantiate the allegations within 60 days. What I came to learn while going through this system is that although it is written into their law that they can remove your child from the home based purely on allegations, no substantiated evidence, they're supposed to come to court in under 60 days to substantiate that information. Well, when I went to the Minnesota Judiciary and I requested some statistics on how many children have been taken in the last 5 years, and there was over 37,000 children that were removed based on Minnesota statutes. And I said, well, then how many had their cases substantiated within 60 days as required by law? In the last 5 years, only 463 cases were substantiated or actually had the trial to substantiate the allegations. So all of these children are being retained in foster care with no evidence of any physical harm whatsoever. It happened with Amanda Weber. It happened with myself. And it's happening.
And what percentage of that? What percentage of that did they give them? Did they abide by the 60-day thing limit?
Only 463 out of 37,000 cases were actually brought to court where the social worker substantiated at trial the allegations of abuse. So that means all of these.
And then the other part of it is you've talked about how the vast majority of these allegations are not about anything that the child needs to be taken out of the family quickly for. I mean, it's not about violent or sexual abuse, but it's because somebody thought, well, they're playing outside and I think that's not a good thing, or they're being homeschooled. I don't think that's a good thing. I mean, what percentage of the people, what percentage of these are even allegations about violence or sexual attack? And then what percentage of those are actually eventually found to be true after an investigation?
Well, here's the interesting part. Only 4% of the allegations are for sexual assault and 12% are for physical assault. Those are just allegations. 84% of the children are removed when there is no evidence of harm to the child whatsoever. The thing that I have not been able to get out of CPS, and I've looked at all of the federal reports, all of the state reports, are how many of the allegations were actually substantiated. They put that nowhere. Now, you would think that if they were, righteous as they claim to be, they would say out of 4% of the allegations, 4% were found, guilty of abuse. But you don't find that anywhere. Even the federal reports where they receive their funding is based purely on, well, how many cases did you take in? Not how many were found guilty. In Minnesota and most states, you get put on a child abuse register purely based on the allegations. The social worker would say, well, we think that based upon these allegations, you abused your child. Not that you even gone to trial in 60 days where they substantiated it. You're put on this list before they even verify at trial, and you're found guilty of abuse. So that's one of
Wow.
the atrocities that's going on across the United States at this time.
Yeah, yeah. So 84% of the people that have their kids taken away, and they're supposed to, go through this thing within 60 days, which they don't. Only 400 out of, was it 30-some thousand people? But, 84% of the people, they're not accused of anything under which the child is even under immediate threat. To justify this, and as you point out, they keep those statistics quiet. Let's talk about the Parental Rights Amendment. We got a couple of minutes. We've got about 3 minutes before we have to go to break. Talk about the Parental Rights Amendment as one way to remedy this. We don't have any parental rights specifically protected in the Constitution. Let's talk about the Parental Rights Amendment.
Correct. The Parental Rights Agreement, which is HJRES 36, was brought before Congress this session. And what it is seeking to do is to specifically add parental rights in the text of the U.S. Constitution, to protect the rights that had been given to us by the court as it stands right now. And there's 5 sections to the amendment proposing at its core that the liberty interest of parents in the direction of bringing up their child, educational decision, and the care of the children be a fundamental right to the parent. So there's 5 key sections that people can look at, and they can sign on to our website, and we break down those 5 sections in detail and how they were derived. And then we also have a frequently asked questions website where we go through 20 questions that most people ask about this amendment.
Yeah, because, and the reason this came up is really because the United Nations and every country has signed on to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. If we take strictly an individual rights approach to this, what the UN is doing, the same people who have really no appreciation for our individual rights, are using the concept that they neglect for adults. They're using that to try to break children away from their parents so that they can run their agenda with these kids who are not of the age in which they can make these kinds of judgments. And so the UN has a program that has not been adopted. The United States is the only country that has not adopted this so far. And so that's why it's really urgent for us to get into the parental rights and to establish that as a right here in America before we get somebody in office, before we get a Democrat president and a Democrat Congress and Senate that's going to run this thing through in alignment with the UN attack on parents. Because by establishing that children have individual rights, and we already see how this is starting to happen with the gaslighting of children on gender fluidity and things like that in the schools. Children do not have the ability to make those kinds of decisions. There's a lot behind that. We'll talk more about that when we come back with Dwight Mitchell. Understand their point of attack, folks. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking to Dwight Mitchell of the FamilyPreservationFoundation.org. And we're talking about the Parental Rights Amendment. This has been introduced into the Congress. It's got one sponsor. We need to build support for this. And so there is a petition to help to do that. And we wanted to draw attention to that with Dwight Mitchell. Dwight, just tell the audience real quickly, what is the Parental Rights Amendment?
Well, the Parental Rights Amendment is going to, and maybe I should take a step back. Parental rights were, although we didn't have a constitutional right to parental rights, they were firmly established in America in the court system. And it was an American tradition that was enduring up until about 20 years ago. A famous Supreme Court case came down called Troxel versus Granville. And what that did is that it undid everything that was fundamental as it relates to parental rights in our country. So the 9 justices could not come to a decision on parental rights. There were 6 separate opinions, and none received the 5-vote majority. In fact, Justice Scalia actually held that parents have no constitution protected rights whatsoever. So what that has done is thrown the lower courts into turmoil. They're doing whatever they want now. They aren't respecting parents or their parental rights, and they're in effect saying that the government has the right to tell you to do whatever you want to do with your children. I don't know about most parents, but I'm really big on my constitutional rights, and I believe that this parental rights amendment should go through. So much so that our foundation created a petition on the WhiteHouse.gov website. Now, what that means is that if we get 100,000 people, 100,000 parents, actually anyone 13 and above, to sign our petition, so they sign it, they get an email, they validate the email, then it comes back and it says, okay, that's a count. If we get 100,000 votes within 30 days, our uh, our petition will be put in front of the policymakers. So it'll be put in front of Congress, and we're saying we want you to act on this bill that's currently on the floor in session right now. A lot of other things have come up this year with COVID and things of that nature. So the parental rights amendment really hasn't gotten a lot of traction because of COVID. And so we brought the petition back out and said, listen, we don't want you to forget about this. We want you to act on it now in this session. We want you to bring this to the floor, and we want you to firmly reestablish parental rights in America.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. It's an important point. We talked about the Troxler decision because, again, Scalia was on the wrong side of the issue. And we've talked about how judges can legislate from the bench, and I think this is a good example of this. And why we should not be focusing all of our energy on who gets to sit in the chair. We need to put up obstacles to judicial supremacy, to the Supreme Court taking over our society. And I've talked about this in terms of even the COVID lockdown. I said, look, they're going to do it. They're going to intrude even more into the doctor-patient relationship. Just as with this decision from Scalia, they intruded into the parent-child relationship. And these things are not happening in a vacuum. You got judges all over the country, like the case that we had with James Younger, where the mother, and again, this is a situation where the child did not have any biological connection to her even. It was a surrogate child and then a divorce, and I don't know what her motivations were on this, but the mother decided that she wanted to change one of the twins to a girl, even though it's a male child, biological male. And so she has a judge advocating with her that they're going to subject this child to hormone treatments to essentially chemically sterilize him before the age of 8. Now, this is real child abuse. It's being done systemically by judges, but it all goes back to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, to establish that children have their rights. I mean, we look at what's going on with the Conway family, George and Kellyanne. They got their daughter who wants to divorce them and so forth. This kind of stuff is coming from the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. We have to stop the UN. We have to stop the Supreme Court. One of the ways that you do this is with a constitutional amendment. And Dwight, I think this example should be put into the constitutions of various states as well, because we need to start bringing back the 9th and 10th Amendment that says, no, states and people in the states have some say over their lives. We are not subject to the rulings and the discretion of Supreme Court justices alone.
Well, parental rights have been eroding for the last 20 years. Most people aren't even aware of what's taking place. Parents are so busy just working, trying to make ends meet. Children being removed at an alarming rate that people aren't aware of for grounds that aren't even sufficient. For example, innocent parents are having their children removed for asking for a second medical opinion, for education, for questioning vaccinations, for false allegations during these ugly divorces that go on. So there's this abuse that's going on that is, completely flying under the radar. The most heinous one I heard is when the CPS got involved in a case where the mother allowed her 8-year-old daughter to walk the dog around the block. Heck, when we were kids, we all had to walk the dog around the block. Our parents weren't doing it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
CPS got involved in that. And so,
Yeah, when I was a child, I aspired to be like the Little Rascals. I wanted to do things a lot more dangerous than walking my dog around the block.
I know, exactly. But you sit here, though, and people don't realize, based upon the federal reports, if you go look at the AFCAR reports, 9 million children have been removed from the family home in the last 20 years. That's like 9 million forcibly separated from their parents and traumatized. Everyone knows it's traumatizing. For them to say that it's not, the system has actually admitted it. You go look at Molly McGrath's TEDx, or you go look at Dr. Jessica Price's TEDx. They're all admitting that the children are being traumatized, yet the government is allowing this to happen. And only 84% of the children are being removed with no physical harm whatsoever. So you sit here and you look at all of this and you're like, how can you not be for parental rights? How can you not sit here and
That's
say,
right.
I'm not advocating, I'm not anti-CPS, whatsoever. I think the entire system needs to be re-engineered because it's become a global industrial complex, just like the penal system in America.
Yeah, yeah,
When I say
exactly. And
global,
it's
it's
so
happening all over the
disingenuous.
world.
It's so disingenuous for the left to talk about child separations of the border when it is a teeny tiny fraction of what's happening here. And these are people we don't know that they're even related, let alone their parents. That's why this is, I mean, they're going across a very dangerous international border crossing, which in and of itself, even if these people were their parents, basically could be grounds for child abuse. But nevertheless, they don't know that they're not in part of a child trafficking network. And yet they will talk about that incessantly and yet completely ignore the vast numbers of Americans who are having their children taken away from them for no reason whatsoever, really.
People don't realize that the U.S. has taken between 400 and 500,000 kids annually for the last 20 years. And I tell everyone, don't believe me. Come to the website, look at our CPS statistics. I give you the links to the federal documents to support everything I say. So I'm not shooting from the hip. I'm in, the information technology arena. My job is business process reengineering. So I've sat and looked at what really needs to be done to CPS to overhaul it and to re-engineer the process. And I'm trying to get the word out. I've been talking to senators and legislatures. I've spoken before a number of task force in Minnesota. And what we really want to happen with this parental rights amendment is that we want the rights of all parents to be brought back in line. And we're not saying that the government doesn't have a compelling interest if the child is being abused. Of course, if the child is being abused, you need to take the child. But if 84% of the children, aren't being physically abused, then you need to do services. You need to do whatever you need to do in the family home. You need to follow the Family First Act that was.
We got to take a break, Dwight. We're going to be right back. Dwight Mitchell, familypreservationfoundation.org. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the details of this. Stay with us. Be right back. All right, going back to Dwight Mitchell, and again, the website, if you want to get more information and find out if you're in a situation right now where somebody has filed a complaint against you because they don't like your kids playing outside, or they don't like the fact that you homeschool, or maybe you've got the school coming after you because they want your kids vaccinated, or they want them to change their gender or something like that, right? Just understand that there are videos at the familypreservationfoundation.org to tell you what your legal rights are. Don't be naive enough to think that just because you haven't done anything wrong, they won't treat you like a criminal. Don't be naive enough to think that if you stand up for your legal constitutional rights, that will make them think that you're guilty. He's got a great series of videos there at the familypreservationfoundation.org. And in this segment, Dwight, let's talk a little bit about how people can get involved in passing the Parental Rights Amendment.
Well, we have created a petition on the whitehouse.gov website where we're looking to obtain 100,000 signatures or more. Currently, everyone is talking about, patriotism and their Second Amendment rights, the constitutional rights. We believe that parents have a constitutional right and that this right should be clearly enumerated in the Constitution. We want everyone to go on, sign on to the petition, help us get 100,000 people in 30 days or less so that this will be put in front of the legislature. It will tell Congress, send them a clear message that we want our parental rights in the Constitution, the same as the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, and anything else. This is what we're looking to achieve. So we're telling everyone, sign the petition, come onto our website, sign up for our newsletter, learn about how the amendment was derived, look at our frequently asked questions, and then get in contact with us. Specifically, if you're having an issue right now, look at our free CPS educational video series. It talks about defending yourself and defending your rights in family court, and what you should do if CPS should happen to start an investigation. Our 35 key tips, or if CPS is knocking at your door, is instrumental. And most people are very, very happy about those tips on what to do, because like myself, I didn't know anything. It's flying under the radar. We're all sitting here thinking, well, if CPS gets involved, the parent must have done something wrong. Well, that's not the case. And, when I found out that 84% of the parents, in fact, had done no physical harm to the child whatsoever, but CPS was still giving them a hard time and removing the children from the home and traumatizing the children and not allowing the children to come back home, I'm like, every patriot, every American citizen who's a parent should be signing this amendment right now. There should be a petition, rather, and they should be telling Congress, we want a constitutional right to be a parent. We want it clearly established and clearly enumerated that we have the care, custody, and control of our children. We get to make the decisions. Yes,
That's
if
right.
we do something
And they
wrong,
don't want that. We've
Right.
heard this from Hillary Clinton. It takes a village to raise a child. No, it doesn't. It takes a parent who loves that child and who knows that child to raise a parent. That's always been the case. But to put it more succinctly, we had Melissa Harris Perry do the PSA for, I think it was MSNBC, saying, we got to get over this notion that the children belong to the parents. That is a distillation of what this UN Convention for the Rights of the Child is all about. Taking the children away from the parents, breaking that relationship in the same way they seek to break the doctor-patient relationship, they seek to break the parent-child, the family relationship. Our society has been built, our communities are built as a collection of families. And if you destroy the family, you have destroyed the basic building block of society. That's why the UN is coming after the family. That's why we have to stand up and stand against this and understand that the judges completely understand what is going on. You may not have heard of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, but they have. And they have looked at the cases in other countries, at the case law in other countries, and it is the judiciary that is putting this through. This is why we have to do this in law at the state level, and we have to do it at the federal level. We have to put this amendment in.
Right. I think parents generally know what's best for their child. The natural bonds of affection and love lead parents to naturally to act in the best interest of their child. We know better than a teacher or a doctor, a bureaucrat, any state agent. Teachers will come to me and try and tell me about my child. I'm like, you don't live with my child. I'm in the house with my child on a day-to-day basis. I know what's good for my child, and I don't want him listening to this garbage you're spewing out in class. And I've told him, if this topic comes up, walk out of the class, tell the principal to call me, and I'll deal with it. Because I'm like, you don't have a right to say what my child hears or learns. I do. It's my child. I'm raising him. I'm the one who's paying for the care, custody, and upkeep of my child. And I love my child. And like most Americans and patriots who love their children, we want the best for our children. And we do know what's in the best interest of our child. And the government can't tell me that. That's just what we feel at Family Preservation Foundation.
When we look at this, again, when it was, originally started putting, a lot of this is about the right of people to choose their own religious beliefs for their children, to teach their own religious beliefs to their children, to do homeschooling and other issues like this. And all of those will be on the table. We've seen horrendous attacks on parents to take away their children because the government doesn't like your religion or doesn't like your homeschooling of them. In other countries like Germany, for example, good example of that. The people who have been all about the forefront of government state education to the exclusion of everything else. But, there was a recent article, Dwight, where the Wall Street Journal was talking about how teachers are finding higher pay and more options because now they're working as a contract with a cluster of parents who are hiring them rather than working with these massive institutions. And that's always been something that we've held out to teachers when I've talked to them about their resistance to homeschooling or to other forms of education. I said, look, if you're a good teacher, you're worth more than the institutions are paying you, and you would have more freedom. And now we're seeing this because of COVID. It's kind of interesting, I think.
It is. What's even more fascinating is I live across the street from two teachers, and the teachers have told me that they're very frustrated in the school system because of this constriction that the family courts and the law has put upon them, and that they are not allowed to do anything to the children. and the parents aren't allowed to discipline the children, and the children are just out of control. They've
Yeah.
told me that it's been, more easy for them to actually do the Zoom conferencing and things of that nature than to actually work in the classroom. So, like you said, David, if you had these pod classes going on, I mean, I'm clearly in favor of charter schools and smaller schools, a smaller group of children being taught by a teacher. I know when I homeschooled my own son for 2 years, two of them, they wanted to go back into the school system. They went back in and were tested, and they were so advanced that they had to be skipped a grade. And I'm sitting here going like, well, I only gave them the fourth grade curriculum and the fifth grade curriculum of homeschooling. I'm like, why are they so more advanced than the regular kids in school? They had to actually skip my kids because they were so smart after me homeschooling them. So,
because you were teaching them stuff rather than socially conditioning them. That really is the mission of the schools. Thank you so much again, Dwight Mitchell. If you want to find out how to get involved in the Parental Rights Amendment, familypreservationfoundation.org. Thank you, Dwight.
This is your last chance to get 8-pack Power Stack, and I'm really bummed out about that. It started out as a sleeper product, but the people that did order it loved it and started reordering it. They spread the word and it became one of our best sellers. But because of the COVID supply chain breakdown and because there's 13 different formulas in 8-pack Power Stack, we are unable to secure it anymore. This is the highest in AM/PM pack system you're going to find, where you take half the pills in the morning, half the caplets and pills and gel caps at night. It's amazing. I don't have time to go into everything that's in it, but this gets people to remember to take it, and that's why it's having such a great effect, because the stuff in here is absolutely amazing. So it's your last chance to get 8-pack Power Stack at InfoWarsStore.com. It's 60% off and free shipping. That is at cost. For all of you that already support InfoWars, we're passing these savings on to you. Get your 8-pack Power Stack now while you still can. Last chance to get it, InfoWarsStore.com. 8-pack Power Stack, 60% off and free shipping.